Montreal studio is working on the next Mass Effect game, our team here in Edmonton is developing a completely new IP.
It's a chance to have a clean sheet design and start from the most fundamental principles you can have.
We want to take on very contemporary stories, and yet we want to build a world that is as big and as imaginative as everything we've done before.
It starts off with baby steps. What are the environments? What are cities like? What are characters like?
So we're trying to build a fictional world that feels real and is alive and is constantly changing.
This is what the world is doing right now. Come and play.
At BioWare, we're building worlds and journeys for the next generation.
How far can we go with these new games? Wait and see.
The year is 2012. The release of Mass Effect 3 was on its way, and development on a new BioWare project, originally codenamed Dylan, was underway. This game would eventually be named Beyond until 2017, and then finally settle on the name Anthem. Moving past Mass Effect, the BioWare Edmonton team decided to push Mass Effect to its newly founded Montreal branch, which led to the infamous Mass Effect Andromeda. However, Anthem fared no better in the public eye. Anthem was an ambitious game that desired to attain a 10-year lifespan. The game's basic idea was to have an action RPG featuring exosuit-wearing freelancers. It was supposed to be a fun, lasting experience that would bring an online multiplayer component coupled with the charm of BioWare's RPG style. Published by EA in 2019, the game would only last for 2 years post-launch before EA announced that it was pulling the plug on Anthem in 2021. There are many reasons why video games are prone to dying, and each game has its own unique case. Anthem's, however, is a sad story of a game that died a tragic death. A story of a game that simply could not last amid a myriad of bugs, glitches, development issues, a lack of identity, and so much more. Anthem could not stand on its own 2 feet in the realm of RPGs or live service games. Similar IPs by BioWare significantly outdid Anthem in the RPG field, and games like Destiny, The Division, Warframe, and many other live service games had set the standard for what makes a decent live service. Additionally, Anthem was plagued by a swath of development issues that did not seem to end even after the launch. This is the story of Anthem, the game that died dramatically and miserably.
The gods vanished and left our world in chaos.
BioWare is a Canadian developer based in Edmonton, Alberta. The studio was founded in 1995 by, ironically enough, newly graduated medical doctors. The studio would eventually go on to be acquired by the American-based video game company Electronic Arts, commonly shortened to EA. BioWare's specialty lies in its ability to create amazing RPG games. For a long time, BioWare achieved grand success under its original franchise, Baldur's Gate. Developed before the EA purchase, Baldur's Gate was in development for 3 years and sold more than 2 copies after release. Baldur's Gate 2: Shadow of Amn was released in 2000 and sold also 2 million copies. BioWare's branch in Austin, Texas worked on Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, which was arguably one of the most popular RPG games of its time, and to this day receives a massive amount of praise from die-hard Star Wars fans. The BioWare RPG formula had a strong and attractive charm to many gamers. People found their narrative ability and storytelling experience to be powerful, full of life, and genuinely fun. Then, in 2007, BioWare was purchased by EA but would retain its own branding. In 2007, BioWare released Mass Effect, which has become one of the biggest sci-fi RPGs in the world. Mass Effect received lots of praise, cementing itself as a piece of BioWare's success with RPG games, and to this day is considered an amazing video game. BioWare certainly knew how to create a fun RPG experience that many would enjoy. However, Mass Effect's reign of praise would come to a screeching halt with the release of Mass Effect Andromeda. BioWare Montreal had been working on the title, which butchered the reputation of BioWare Montreal. Andromeda seemed to not understand the formula of what made Mass Effect such a hit success, and so it suffered for that. Their extremely popular Dragon Age series was also a success, creating a massive fantasy world with its classic RPG formula. With its customization, medieval setting, and so much more, Dragon Age was also a widely beloved RPG series. BioWare seemed to be, for the most part, understanding of the formula that made RPGs fun and exciting. Some games have tried, but couldn't do it the way BioWare seemed to. But of course, like all good things, the success and praise eventually had to falter somewhere down the line. And so we come upon what is arguably BioWare's grandest flop, Anthem.
Protectors of our world, this is your time.
Anthem is an action RPG that has strong sci-fi elements. Taking place on the fictional planet Coda, there are strange technological relics that harness the energy of the Anthem of Creation, which is what the game is named after. These unstable relics can change the planet and its wildlife in events that were dubbed cataclysms. Humanity doesn't seem to know much about them, but humans do know that there was a strange godlike race called the Shapers, who left the planet a millennia ago for reasons unknown. Some view the Anthem and the Shapers as sources of all life. The backstory of Anthem is that before the game's timeline, humanity was enslaved by creatures called the Urgoth. However, a human named Helena Tarsis and her team used Shaper technology in order to create powerful exosuits that they used to fight back against the Urgoth. After humanity's victory, Tarsis and her Legion of Dawn became venerated as heroes of legend. The exosuits were dubbed Javelins, and their pilots are the main source of security and protection in the main nation of Bastion. The Freelancers at the heart of the game are a group of mercenaries that fight against a hostile species called Scars. They also defend against disasters caused by Shaper artifacts. The Bastion's intelligence is run by Corvus, a clandestine organization. The plot of Anthem revolves around you, the Freelancer, and your attempts to fight against these evils that are affecting humanity. At the beginning of the game, a freelancer named Halleck gathers an army of other freelancers to stop a Shaper relic called the Cenotaph, which has immense destructive power. This Cenotaph is being targeted by an authoritarian faction in the Bastion called the Dominion, who genuinely believe that they could control the Anthem if they gained the Cenotaph. However, their activation of the Cenotaph caused a massive explosion and left a cataclysm in what has been dubbed the Heart of Rage. 10 years later, Halleck and his companions desire to enter the Heart of Rage and deactivate the Cenotaph. Several other characters are accompanying Halleck, but most of the other mercenaries are killed off not too far into the mission. Your Freelancer is one of the only ones to survive besides Halleck. The failure causes a shakeup in the belief of people in the Freelancers, who lose much of their rank and public approval. 2 years after this disastrous mission, a cipher named Owen and your Freelancer work like contracts for locals and try to make do with anything. Because people lost faith in the Freelancers, jobs are basically as scarce as they can get. To note, ciphers are people with psychic mystical powers that aid Freelancers in their work against the Shapers and Scars. The player's character gets hired by a Corvus agent named Tassin to locate missing individuals and workers for Corvus. Essentially, Tassin is the source of most of the main missions in the storyline, the most important being a missing spy who was undercover with a smuggling gang called the Regulators. In one hideout, the player encounters a Dominion leader named Monitor, who is a powerful cipher, javelin pilot, and had aided in the creation of the Heart of Rage. The Monitor kills the spy and takes a Shaper relic. The Corvus agent decides that the Dominion is attempting to try and reach the Cenotaph again, and the player is hired to reach it before the enemy does. Halleck and his cipher partner Faye are recruited to help the player in this mission as well. By the end of the game, the player discovers that the Monitor has built something called a conduit to merge with the Anthem, resulting in an anticipated boss fight. After the Monitor's death, Faye deactivates the Cenotaph and effectively closes the Heart of Rage. The game ends with a cliffhanger where Tassin shows the player the body of an Urgoth killed in Bastion's borders, hinting that the next game would result in the player having to fight the Urgoth. Of course, that's not the case. In fact, there was never a second Anthem game, as the first didn't even last beyond 2 years. Despite its seemingly solid story and pretty safe video game formula, Anthem was unable to maintain a solid player base, and was unable to fix the game. Although BioWare and EA promised to overhaul the entire game and adjust it in order to be a more fun experience, and in fact more playable, the game's plug was pulled. It seemed as though it just wasn't profitable for EA to invest more time in Anthem.
We're just grabbing some supplies, just about ready.
What are you gonna use today?
I decided to go with the Colossus.
I'm gonna use my Ranger. Try out some new upgrades.
As mentioned earlier in the video, Anthem's development began in 2012 and was spearheaded by BioWare Edmonton. BioWare is well known for its previous Mass Effect trilogy and Dragon Age franchise. By then, they were known to be a well-established developer of video games. Their reputation was solid and they were coasting along on their streak of success. The early idea of Anthem wasn't cemented in any ground just yet, but the devs had a base concept in mind to have a more mission-driven survival game over a looter shooter that included exosuits that were, in a sense, more grungy Iron Man. Anthem's identity was not clear for a long time, but the developers wanted to create a game that moved away from Mass Effect and Dragon Age, one that was more unique to itself. BioWare wanted to design something different and new, that was clear from the beginning. However, there were initial issues with the concept of the game. Art and gameplay were shaky in terms of idea, and the Frostbite engine was beginning to take a toll on the game's potential end result. Many video game developers usually have specific engines that they design to utilize in their games exclusively. You've probably heard of Unreal Engine and Unity before, which are game engines. These engines are more like libraries that contain the framework for creating complex projects like video games. Many studios will use the same engine for many projects, as creating an engine is not a simple task. Game engines determine things like graphics, AI, and game physics, and so much more. They're used by developers everywhere, as it more or less simplifies the development process. That's not to say that game development is an easy endeavor, but it's at least facilitated by said engines. The Frostbite engine was developed by DICE. DICE is a subsidiary of EA as well and was acquired by EA back in 2006. Frostbite was designed for cross-platform games. It was originally utilized for Battlefield but is exclusively used in EA games, which means that it was expanded to other franchises. However, Frostbite is notorious for being complex and very difficult. It led to issues for Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, and now Battlefield 2042. Individuals in the development teams with little experience utilizing Frostbite struggled on several projects. BioWare even stated that the complexity of Frostbite was a contributing factor in the difficulty of Anthem's development. As an engine, it's not exactly bad, but it is difficult. To put it simply, it has a higher learning curve for developers in the industry. For BioWare, this difficulty led to planned features needing to be removed. Not only that, but many of BioWare's team that were familiar with Frostbite were moved to help support the development of FIFA after that IP moved to Frostbite as well. This left many devs who needed guidance and aid to fend on their own with the difficult engine. The BioWare team had not wanted to use Frostbite, but EA execs wanted all of their games to use the same technology. It instantly created an obstacle in a properly pieced timeline for the development of Anthem. Frostbite was built for more military shooter FPS games, which was not Anthem's vision. For a game like Battlefield, Frostbite worked as it was meant to. However, for a game like Anthem, Frostbite limited many of the features and forced the developers to build many needed systems from scratch. To add insult to injury, executive producer of the original Mass Effect trilogy, Casey Hudson, left BioWare in August 2014. He had believed that the team located at BioWare Edmonton would be able to successfully continue without him. However, this couldn't have been further from the truth. Upon Hudson's leaving, the development team began to struggle. Not only that, but the original story was shifted completely when Dragon Age writer David Gator was hired in 2015. He changed the story to something more in line with Dragon Age and Mass Effect, which was counter to what BioWare was attempting to do with Anthem. Subsequently, Gator left BioWare in 2016, and the team reverted the story back to their original idea. However, the issues with art and level design had already been cemented, leading to even more problems in the development cycle. The vision of Anthem was becoming muddled and lost in a field of uncertainty. There was no set identity, and after the aforementioned directional shifts in the game's idea, Anthem was beginning to feel more like a burden on BioWare than it was a potentially great project. 4 years in, Anthem was still barely close to having a presentable product. Many felt in the studio that it was becoming far too similar to another live service named Destiny. It was disheartening, to say the least. From here, it doesn't get any better. In early 2017, a Christmas demo of Anthem was given to the staff. Patrick Soderlund, former executive at EA and former head of DICE, was not pleased with the way the demo looked in comparison to the 2014 teaser trailer presented at E3. Soderlund told BioWare to create a new demo, which heightened fears that Anthem would be cancelled if the demo was not up to Soderlund's standards. For 6 weeks, BioWare crunched to work on the game, then called Beyond, and created a product that was able to pass Soderlund's inspection, so to speak. However, EA wanted a new name instead of Beyond. They felt that it was difficult to trademark Beyond and needed something different. Hence, the name Anthem came forth. However, Anthem didn't have any narrative grounding in the game, and so the team invented an entirely new piece of narrative in the game, which would later be called the Anthem of Creation, and then had a reason for calling it Anthem. At the same time as this was all happening, Mass Effect Andromeda was slammed with an unsuccessful reception. So the fears of Anthem failing as well were becoming even more stressed. BioWare Austin were sent to aid Edmonton in working on Anthem, but the two teams didn't get along well. BioWare Austin's team that was sent to aid in Anthem felt that the game did not have a solid grasp of itself. They were confused, unsure of what the final product was supposed to be. Both teams did not have a full concept in mind, with many developers themselves uncertain. It led to rifts between both groups as they tried to navigate the murky waters, each with their own end vision of Anthem. One of the biggest issues was the fact that BioWare Austin was responsible for online live service games like Star Wars: The Old Republic, but BioWare Edmonton was more used to creating games for a single-player experience. Because Anthem was supposed to be a live service, the Austin team tried to pitch many ideas on how to make the game better for its model. However, the Edmonton team seemed to clash frequently with them over decisions on how to develop the story and gameplay experience. Developers at Austin frequently described being ignored by the Edmonton team over what they felt were vital changes that needed to be made to improve Anthem's playability. After E3 2017, Austin developers described how the game was essentially going back to the drawing board. They were overhauling entire systems. It seemed as though there was still no clarity on what Anthem was supposed to be and how it would be accomplished in a standard or timely fashion. In mid-2017, lead gameplay designer Corey Gasper suddenly died. Several staff at BioWare left the studio around the same time frame. The game was supposed to be already in pre-production around June 2017, but still well into August, Anthem was far behind schedule. The game was set to be released in Q4 of 2018. BioWare communicated that the deadline could not be met, but EA refused to allow a delay past March 2019. So, in October 2017, Hudson returned to BioWare as the project lead and studio head, effectively replacing Aaron Flynn, the former studio general manager. Staff working on another Dragon Age title were then moved towards Anthem to support the game. Mark Darrow was placed as an executive producer who was able to facilitate the team into finishing the game. His goal was to ship the game already, as it was far too behind schedule. Many developers could not last on the project and would take medical leave due to near mental breakdowns as a result of stress. Unfortunately, a constantly overlooked piece of the game development process has been the immense pressure placed on developers themselves. Some would leave for months, and others would leave and not return, which was coined as, quote, stress casualties. However, due to the massive issues during the development and the swarm of delays and team shifts, the story and gameplay elements were haphazard at best. However, it was a playable game. That was all they could do. EA CEO Andrew Wilson spoke in E3 2019 that Anthem had not met EA's expectations, but that EA would be committed to improving the game. He stated that playtests had generally positive results for about 30 hours of it, but those wanting a proper BioWare-level story were disappointed with the lack of a developed story. However, Wilson was hoping that BioWare would be able to fix the game in the long run and allow for it to satisfy lots of players. On February 22, 2019, Anthem finally launched to the public for purchase. However, the reception was less than stellar. Anthem received mixed or average reviews on Metacritic. IGN gave it a 6.5 out of 10, Eurogamer gave it a 3 out of 5. Metacritic showed that on PC it received a 59 out of 100. It was relatively the same on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. Many reviews found that the game's story was lackluster and that it was far too grindy. Many found it empty or shallow. However, there was praise for the combat mechanics and some of the flight mechanics as well. Anthem was the second highest launch for a BioWare game right after Mass Effect 3. It sold well at first, but it did not reach the 6 million copy sale goal for the end of March. EA's CFO Blake Jorgensen believed that more would come from microtransactions, which would offset the failed goal number. EA promised that the game would be reworked and fixed post-launch. For some time, there was work being done on it. In August 2019, BioWare released the first timed act called Cataclysms. In September 2019, BioWare announced that they would begin delivering seasonal updates instead in order to improve the core elements of the game. In October 2019, they introduced the first season, but it didn't feel very different compared to Cataclysms from the few months prior. In February 2020, BioWare announced that it would end seasonal updates in order to reboot the game, as they believed it needed to be reinvented and completely revamped. They called this reboot Anthem Next. It was supposed to fix the game and bring it into a more enjoyable light. Then, in February 2021, EA decided that there would be no more work done on Anthem, no more updates, no more seasonal content, no more events. Nothing. That was it. The servers would be supported, but the game was abandoned. The teams were moved to work on Mass Effect and Dragon Age instead. The pandemic also stunted any potential revival of the game. As developers around the world struggled to ship new games, Anthem fared no better. Studios were forced to shutter their doors as the early uncertainties surrounding COVID-19 made working from an office near impossible. BioWare developers working from home produced a challenge that made it near impossible for Anthem Next's potential fixes to be made. Anthem just could not survive. It would not be able to receive any more updates. Financially, EA decided that it wasn't worth the efforts and instead focused in on titles that were reaping benefits, like Star Wars: The Old Republic and the aforementioned Mass Effect and Dragon Age franchises. EA's executives had shut down Anthem Next and determined that pooling more time, money, and resources would not be able to repair the damages made during the first impression of the game. Players were leaving and had begun to expect little from the title, despite it having some level of decent popularity initially. Still, Anthem suffered grandly from its messy and convoluted development process that placing it on solid grounding was becoming more of a burden than anything else. Despite initial speeches given about Anthem's lifespan, the game had no chance of making it past the 2-year mark. And as such, EA announced its termination of updates to the game. Now, Anthem is left like a dusty book in the back of a library, forgotten and abandoned.
Together!
Let's do it!
Yeah!
Ready, Captain One?
Ooh, ready! Strong along, stronger together.
Reviews did not praise this game much. As a game, its campaign was considered decent for a good portion of it. However, for a live service game, there wasn't much content-wise to make it a fun RPG live service experience. Even the story was mostly uninspired and bland according to many who played it. Users on Reddit found that after about 30 hours, the game indeed became stale and boring. There wasn't much motivation for the average player to continue on and complete the game in its entirety. Most were finding it difficult to justify playing much of the game when there were other games out there. Despite initial excitement generated by the E3 reveals, players were disappointed by the end results. There was a massive lack of loot for a game labeled to be a looter-shooter. As mentioned earlier, the lack of any real seasonal content or events, followed by the ending of these updates, truly cemented that the game wasn't meeting expectations in its lifetime. Bugs and glitches were also egregious and quite terrible, and it wasn't just at launch. Prior to launch, the demo was also a broken, buggy nightmare. Players were stuck with issues in flying mechanics, among others. Graphically, it was quite impressive. However, look isn't everything regarding a video game. Anthem's looks were quite great, but with its little to no engaging content, the look was not enough to save it from descending into the void. The day one patch that promised to fix most of the prevalent issues didn't really end up fixing much. Players were finding less of a reason to stick around and see the game to its end. For a live service, it didn't do much to keep players enjoying it. In order for any live service to succeed, it needs to be compelling enough and fun to keep players going in for more time. Live services rely on player counts. Without players, a live service is effectively a ghost town. It's what has allowed for games like Star Wars: The Old Republic to survive until now. With a massive player count every day, the game has the chance to exist and update frequently. There are enough players to keep it alive, but Anthem did not reach that level. BioWare's previous hit with Andromeda created skepticism with its fans to the point where some probably didn't have much faith in Anthem. However, many BioWare fans tried to push Andromeda's shortcomings aside as being a product of a different, simply bad, BioWare studio from Montreal. Many tried to assert that at the end of the day, BioWare magic would pull through and the game would be cleverly brilliant no matter what issues it could have faced. The BioWare magic could not pull through for Anthem, nor for Andromeda. E3 2017 showed one product. In the trailers, players were shown a graphically brilliant game that promised high combat action, fun RPG elements, and so much more. Yet, the launched product was a far cry from just that. Anthem fell into a bottomless pit, promising one thing and handing players a completely different title. The game didn't reap much of a major financial success for them, and it didn't really pioneer the looter-shooter field either. The question that arose was, why would players go for Anthem when other, better, or at least more fleshed out looter-shooters exist? Looter-shooters that understand their genre and what makes said genre successful. Destiny, The Division, Borderlands, and so much more. Again, why play a game that doesn't understand its identity when so many other titles understood exactly what they were trying to do? EA's continual pushing of its marketing campaign ignored warnings from the developers that Anthem's final product would not necessarily be like the reveals, as some gameplay mechanics weren't fully set as of the reveals. Anthem's biggest issue had to be its lack of identity. It felt as though Anthem wanted to be every game and no game at the same time. Its missions felt repetitive to many, and it didn't necessarily provide anything innovative in comparison to other live service titles, looter shooters, or RPGs. Although it received updates that added new items to the game, there wasn't much that felt redeemable by players. Its loot was considered lackluster by most who played it, without too much of a motivation to continue attempting to get more loot in the world. Simply put, Anthem's players did not feel as though the game was charming or unique on its own. Overall, Anthem couldn't stand on its own 2 feet. Its lack of direction, identity, story, content, and more cemented its fall from grace with fans. Not only that, but issues in the development process, including problems with the Frostbite engine, and a lack of cohesion between developers flourished this recipe for disaster of a game. Additionally, the bugs, glitches, and issues with the game's release created a sour first impression for players. The trailers and reveals presented a product that was disappointingly different in comparison to the retail launch. Anthem was a game that had potential, but unfortunately, Anthem is what could be considered a dead game. Although the servers are still up, It's not clear how long this will be continuing on for. Nobody could have considered the initial ending of its update cycle, and they may easily shut all servers down one day for good. Anthem has fallen from its shaky pedestal and has become scarred by its own death. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and comment on this video. Consider subscribing to the channel to help support these videos into the future. Also, remember to turn notifications on so you never miss an upload. Follow me over on my socials to get updates on future videos, interesting content, and more. This was Symbiosis, signing off.